Welcome back to Self-Love Ignited. On today's episode, I am interviewing Amanda Stokes, and it is a good one. She gets real about her battle with bulimia, about coming clean, getting help, learning to embrace her body, and how she has created an amazing life and a movement to help the next generation, her daughter and other girls of the world, not have to go through the same body image crap that so many of us have gone through. Amanda is an author, educator, presenter, and seeker of life's lessons. She is also a mother to three and founder of Raising Strong Daughters. Amanda is also an eating disorder survivor who shares her story so others feel less alone. I cannot wait for you to meet Amanda. She is wonderful. Jump on it. My name is Katie Allen, and this is Self-Love Ignited. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode of Self-Love Ignited, I am interviewing Amanda, and I cannot wait to get into this. Amanda, welcome to the podcast. I'm really happy to have you here. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody?
Thank you so much for having me. So I am Amanda Stokes and I'm an educator, I'm an author. These days I'm a presenter, I'm a mother to three, I'm an eating disorder survivor, and I'm a passionate advocate of young women and women in general and mothers who are bringing up girls in today's world, among many other things.
I love it. I love it. And you and I first connected, I couldn't even tell you how many months ago. And we went back and forth and then trying to find a time to record this. And I'm so happy that we finally have, because your story is incredible, but also your passion for what you do and your mission is something that I think everybody needs. So yeah, I'm so grateful for you taking the time to be here.
I'm very excited as well. It has been a long time coming, but they say every good thing, you need to wait a little while for it to happen.
Exactly. So, so this podcast is all about self-love, right? Self-love ignited. That's what we're called. And these episodes that I do, these interviews that I do, it's really to help listeners see themselves in these stories, because I think when we are struggling with our relationship with ourselves or with our body, sometimes it can be really difficult to see how we could ever overcome that. It really is all consuming. So Amanda, I would love for you to share your story, your struggles, your challenges. Go back to the beginning and tell us how that all started for you.
Okay, so I'm going to start towards the end and then work my way backwards because it makes it all make sense. It was 2017 and I had been a dieter for as long as I could remember. I developed an eating disorder at the age of 22 after growing up with a mother who had always dieted. So from a really young age, I came to understand that smaller bodies were better bodies. My mum was never happy with her body, and I was very aware of my body, and I paid attention to the fact that I felt like all of my friends had smaller bodies than I did, and I was very self-conscious growing up. Time went on, I became a mum, and I was always on or off a diet, and was when my eldest daughter was 6, and at the time I was doing a low carb, high fat diet. And one night I was serving pasta for my kids, and I would just eat the bolognese sauce. I wouldn't have the pasta. And my daughter asked me why she had to eat the pasta if I didn't have to eat it. And I had this moment where I couldn't really give her an answer. And then I started noticing we would have pizza and I would eat the top off my pizza because that was what I did. And she started to pick the top off her pizza too. And I had this realization that if I didn't do something, I was going to impact another generation of women in my family. And it was a Wednesday night. I had first told he wasn't my husband at the time, but I had first told my husband that I had an eating disorder when I was about 26. And his response to me, he saw eating disorders as a choice. People are making a choice, they're making a decision. And I knew in that moment that he was not going to be a support for me. At the time, I was seeing a therapist and there was no real connection between us. And so I just took my eating disorder underground at that point. So when I was having all of these realizations about the impact I was having on my daughter, I made the decision that I was going to have to come clean. And so I came home from work on a Wednesday night and I sat down with my husband and I told him I'd had an eating disorder for 20 years, that I needed his support. That Friday, I was sitting down with my GP telling him I had an eating disorder for 20 years and I needed some support. And the following Tuesday, I was sitting down with an eating disorder therapist and my journey into recovery began. And that was the start for me of realizing that if that was my story, it was the story of many women, because I was highly educated. I was very confident. People would say I would light up a room when I'd walk into it. And I always would think to myself, if only you knew, because nobody would have guessed it. And so I had this realization of this must be many people's stories. The continuum of body image and eating disorders, that continuum is long. And yes, with my eating disorder, I was certainly down one end, but there are many, many of us who come in along that path. So I made the decision that I was going to share my journey of recovery. And I wrote a book and I started a movement called the Mirror Movement, which was based on the fact that our children mirror our behaviour when it comes to how they see their bodies and the relationship that they have with food. So that is a very long-winded answer. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. And I think you are absolutely right. If that was your story, if that was your truth in that moment, how many women are out there doing the same thing?
Yeah,
And the only way that we heal this, both as individuals and as a society, is to talk about it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The summer before I came out, so it was about May that I came out, and that January I was really unwell. Things were really, I was in a very bad place, and I came back from school holidays. I was a teacher at the time, full time, and I came back from the summer holidays and I had lost a lot of weight, and the compliment that I received were next level. Oh my God, you look amazing. You look so good. I'd go into a shop and people would say, that I was their body goals. And all this time I would be thinking, if you knew the hell that I was living with, you wouldn't be saying those things to me. And, it's now 4 years since I came out. 4 years since I made the decision that it was no longer going to be an option in my life. And so many lessons that I learned along the way.
Yeah. I wanna touch on one thing that you just said about when you were really sick and you were really in that dark place, but you had lost a lot of weight and all these people everywhere you went
Yeah,
were telling you how great you looked and
yeah,
this and that, and I always like to say, just don't comment on people's bodies
yes,
ever. Like,
yes,
ever.
yeah,
Because we live in a thin-centric culture where thinner equals better,
yeah,
people think they're complimenting you.
yes. There are so many things that I would rather be complimented on than my body. And that is one of my number one rules within my home, is we don't comment on anybody's body, because you never know what somebody's story is. You never know who is, who doesn't need to hear positive affirmations for what they're doing. And I would so much rather somebody tell me my eyes sparkle when I tell a story, or that I inspire them. I would rather pay somebody a compliment based on who they are over how they look any day of the week. And the thing is, over my career as a dieter, I always remembered the people who gave me compliments, because when I had gained weight, which is the inevitable part of weight loss, you always gain it back. I would always feel very self-conscious when I saw those people again, because I remember how proud they were and how impressed they were with my weight loss. And those things stick in people's minds. And so, yeah, 100% agree with you. It's never worth it.
It's never, just don't do it. Yeah. So if you're listening, anybody listening to this, please stop commenting on people's bodies. Like, we're
Yes.
putting it out there. Like, that's a blanket
Yes.
statement. Whether you think it's helpful or harmful or whatever, you don't know.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you just don't know. You just don't know. So Amanda, so you said that it's 4 years ago that you sort of
Yeah.
came out, and you asked your husband for support, and then you
Yeah.
went to your GP, and then you went and you
Yes.
saw a therapist very quickly, within what, no,
Yeah. Yeah. It was less than a week.
less than a week.
Yeah.
How was asking for help? Was that a hard thing for you to do?
Um, well, it's an interesting question, because it was one of those things that for every year I would get to my birthday and I would say, that's it, I'm not going to do it anymore. And I may, 2 days I'd be successful and then I'd be back. Every new year, I was like, this is it. This is the year that it's not going to happen. And then, I would be back there again. And so when I finally spoke it, I think I just felt enormous relief, because it was such a heavy burden to hold. And I suffered from bulimia, and you go to levels that you can't even imagine to make sure that you don't get caught. Like, it's a deceptive, there's deception everywhere. And you feel like you are trying to stay 5 steps ahead of everybody else in the room. You don't want anyone to notice. You plan everything, and it is exhausting. And I didn't realize until afterwards how much space was being taken up with thoughts of food, thoughts of, when I was going to eat, what I was planning on eating. Like, it was just all consuming. And so asking for help was the best thing that I ever did,
That's
ever.
that's amazing. That's amazing. I think for so many people, the idea of asking for help is so terrifying that it stops them from ever doing it. But I think,
Yeah.
like, hearing that it's actually the beginning of taking all that weight, that energetic, that
Yeah.
heaviness that's been
Yeah.
on you, you get to take it off. It's just by asking for help.
Yeah. And the therapist that I saw her for a few weeks, and then she went away, and then I went overseas. And I felt like I needed more. So I started reading, and I just became absorbed with understanding the lies of diet culture that I had fallen for such a long time. And, it was like having your eyes opened. And I couldn't believe that I had fallen for all of those messages. And I didn't understand how, as a society, we were buying into those messages. And then I went overseas with my family, and I wasn't ready for, trips had always been a really struggle. It was struggle street for me, because there was always so much food, buffet breakfasts. And I relapsed on that trip, and I came back I didn't tell my husband, but I went to see my therapist and I was just so flat. And she said to me, if your car broke down, you would take that car back to be repaired as many times as it needed to be fixed. And she said, you are no different to that car. And that was the last time, because I realized in that moment that I was worthy of repairing. And I never looked back after that.
That's incredible. That's incredible. What a therapist.
Yeah,
Yeah, you found a good one. It
I
sounds
did.
like, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely did.
Yeah. So what has fill in the last 4 years for me. So
Yeah,
you asked for help, you started getting help, you had that relapse, which I
yeah,
understand was not too far in. It was pretty close to the beginning.
yeah. It was pretty close to the beginning.
Yeah. So what have you done to support yourself and your journey over the
Yeah.
last 4 years? How has that evolved?
So in the very early days, it was just about getting through each day. So I would lie in bed at night, and when you have been somebody who purges, to lie in bed with feelings of fullness is incredibly uncomfortable. And I just, I talked myself through it, and I said, "You're going to be fine. Just wait for the morning. Just try and sleep." And I would wake up in the morning, and I'd be like, "You did it." And then the next day, I would question the idea that I wasn't worthy of having food in me. Like, how sad is that? That I thought that it was actually true that I wasn't worthy of keeping nourishment. And I started to, I call it my unlearning. So I started looking at myself differently in the mirror. I started saying positive things when my kids were nearby. I would compliment my arms and I would compliment my body. There was one morning I was getting dressed and one of my kids came in and she said, "Mum, your butt's really big." And I said, "Thank you, darling." I said, "I love my butt." I said, "This is what women's bottoms look like." I said, "They've got lumps and bumps and jiggly bits and squishy bits." I said, "Your bottom's going to look like that one day." And she just looked at me as though to say, "No, okay." And she walked off. And in that moment, I thought, I have to keep talking the talk because they are going to learn from me. And so, I try and get up every morning and I try and smile at myself in the mirror. There's a mirror opposite the toilet. I try and start the day with a smile. I change the channel in my mind if negative thoughts come back in. And I remind myself, still to this day, I remind myself that nobody actually cares about the size of my thighs. Nobody values me for those things, that I make a contribution to the world that is much greater than my physical body. And, like, I think you have to be real about it though. I still have times where I have, not a great body image day, but I don't dwell there. I get on with my day and I focus on it less. And maybe that day I spend less time looking in the mirror and more time doing the things that I love. And I just try to get on with my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it never stops. Like this is a journey. I always like to say like your relationship with yourself and with your body will evolve every single day until the
Yeah,
day that you die.
yeah,
If it stops evolving, then you're not living anymore.
that's right.
There is no end point. And even I mean, I have this podcast, Self Love Ignited. I still have days that are
Yeah,
off. Like we all do. It just doesn't suck you as deep as it used to.
yeah.
Right? The spiral is not like the spiral of death. It's the spiral of, oh crap, not again. Let's get out of this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right. I'm a relief teacher these days, and today the kids that I'm working with are doing a swimming program. They're grade 2, so they're 7 and 8 year olds, and I was watching them all by the pool, and they are not self conscious yet. There are bellies that are hanging out, and they are loud and proud, and some of them are small and proud, and they are everything we should be.
Yeah.
And it's so sad to think that over the next few years, society will get to them. The way their mothers talk about their bodies will get to them. The way we compare ourselves to other people will get to them. But right now, we all need to grab onto our inner 7-year-old and just live our lives.
Oh, I could not love that anymore. Grab onto your inner 7-year-old. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. On that note, the work that you do is amazing, and I know that it is very closely tied with your own journey of recovery. So, Amanda, tell us about your book and tell us about your work and your mission.
Okay, so this is another story in itself. So when I came out in 2017, I had known when I was about 21 that I was meant to be inspiring people. I wanted to be a motivational speaker. I wanted to do all of these things, but I knew that nobody was going to listen to a 21-year-old. I needed life experience. And so I went on with my life and I went into teaching. And when I came out about the eating disorder, I felt like I had discovered what it was I was meant to do. I was meant to be working with mums to raise body confident kids. And so started the mirror movement. And then at the end of 2017, I went to my principal at school and I said, I'm going to start a blog over the holidays. And I was working at a private school at the time. And she said, you can't work and do that. It couldn't happen because if somebody was to take my advice, the school would get sued. And so it just didn't work. And this was 3 days out from the end of a school year. And I made the decision that I was going to resign. And so I resigned from this great job. And 2018 came around. I was so excited for what the future was going to bring. I had this idea for positive body image dolls. And so I flew to China, developed a prototype, came back, loads of media attention, was on TV, all of these crazy things were happening. Then that fell in a heap because it just didn't work. And then Mattel came out with their own body image dolls, wrote my book. Whenever I did manage to get somebody to read it, they would say it was, really powerful and every mum should read it, but I just couldn't get people to read it. And I would run events, and I ran events where nobody turned up. And I felt like mums felt like that if they turned up, they were admitting that they were doing something to impact their kids. And so, for 2 years, I tried and tried, but it was just not working. And I woke up January of 2020 and I made the decision that I would change from mirror movement to raising strong daughters, and body image would become one component of a much greater whole. And people started to listen and people started to read my book. So the Mirror on My Wall, which is my first book, is my story, from growing up from an early age with a mum who dieted. It is my story of coming out. And then it's all the things that I had to unlearn, all the things that if I had have known those things, I probably would never have started my career as a dieter. So that was my passionate book. I've since written another book, which is called the Tween Mothers Toolbook. That one covers body image for mums, but it's more about understanding who we are, knowing why we do the things we do, understanding humans, and just working towards being kinder to ourselves. So it's been a ride.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. This ride that you've been on, would you call this like, does the term self-love, is this you stepping into self-love? Is this more about body acceptance? Is it like, is there a term that you use or that feels most true for you?
Yeah, for me, it's self compassion. because for such a long time I lacked compassion towards myself. I was so unkind to myself for the longest time. The things I put my body through, the way I spoke to myself, and I just want to make up for that now. And so I lead with kindness and I lead with compassion when it comes to myself. And I think that has been the greatest gift that I have been able to give myself, because, when you struggle for as long as some of us have struggled for, you don't want that to have been for nothing. So if you can lead the way forward with kindness and understanding and warmth towards yourself, and it's all because you have learnt from the road you have taken. I think it takes us to a better place.
Yeah, 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 100%. Now, I'm curious if there is somebody listening to this who is maybe still in the depths of an eating disorder, where you were 5, 6, 10 years ago. Maybe they haven't been able to fully admit it to themselves yet, or speak to any other support system about it. What words of advice or what tips do you have to give to them to begin?
So my biggest piece of advice would be to remember that you are worth it. And it doesn't matter how many times you try and fail, as long as you keep trying. Don't give up on yourself. It doesn't matter if it takes you 10 years to get there. If you keep going, you will get there. And what I would find is I would get a little bit closer each time. It would be a little bit longer between the binges and the purges. It would, each time it was a little bit, I'd get a little bit closer. But you just have to keep going, because there is no reason why somebody else is worthy of living a good life and you aren't. There's nothing that you have done that deserves you to be going through what you're going through. And so dig as deep as you can and find somebody that you can share your story with. Just speak. We hold so much shame about these things, but in truth, when we speak, we realize that other people might not be suffering in the same way, but other people are suffering. People can relate. You're not alone.
Yeah.
So to, just believe that you can.
Yeah. And I think, Amanda, you sitting here today, us having this conversation and you sharing your story, you are proof.
Yeah.
You are proof that there is life, and there is amazing life.
Yeah.
You're an eating disorder, and the lights turn on and you can make your life whatever you want it, but
Yeah.
you do have to choose.
You do, because there was a time before I, got to this point where I was sure that this was just my life. I was sure of it. I couldn't see any way that it would be different. But here we are today. So you just have to just keep your eyes ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if there's anybody listening who wants to get in touch with you, they want to find out more about your Raising Strong Daughters movement, which I don't have children, but one day when I do,
Yeah.
and I have a niece, and I want to get your books for my sister.
Yeah.
Please tell us how people can find out more about your work, about your books, and how they can get in touch with you.
Okay, so I am very active on Instagram for anybody that loves a bit of Instagram action. So you can find me there at Raising Strong Daughters with an underscore at the end. If you don't put the underscore on, you won't find me. My website is raisingstrongdaughters.com.au, and I run events all over the place. Sometimes I talk about this story that we've been talking about today. Other times I talk with mums and daughters on how to raise self-aware kids. Facebook, I think you've got the link for my Facebook. It's got a little bit of mirror movement in it and a bit of Raising Strong Daughters in the name, so it always confuses me. Facebook wouldn't let me change when I changed my name. So there are a few ways that we can be in touch.
Okay, beautiful. I'll make sure to put all of the links to everything in the show notes. So even the weird, confusing Facebook one, it will be there.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard when you're confused.
Yeah, well, that's Facebook for you. I know.
Yeah.
I know. So Amanda, as we're sort of getting ready to wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to say? Is there anything else that's on your mind, that's on your heart, that feels important?
Oh, golly. I mean, I think the most important thing that I wanted to say, I think I said just before, which is believe that you can do hard things and don't hold on to shame. There's no shame in your story. And one of my favorite quotes is, one day your story will be somebody else's survival story. And I think we all have the potential to be that for someone. So realize that you are magical and treat yourself like you would a friend. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend. And if you wouldn't say it to a friend, then you don't say it to yourself. And see yourself through the eyes of the people who love you. When you are struggling the most to find good things about yourself, see yourself through their eyes. Think about how they would see you. That's a really important part as well.
Yeah. We're so critical of ourselves, but our loved ones love us for a reason. Right?
Do.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's okay to borrow that a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Amanda, we're going to leave it there. This has been wonderful, long overdue, but so good. And I just know that your story is now the inspirational story to others, and it has the capacity to incite healing and transformation. And I'm so grateful for you and your honesty and your truth and your presence with me here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share. And I really do hope that somebody out there needs to hear it and realizes that they can have the same sort of ending.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you. All of the links mentioned during the episode are down in the show notes. Please make sure to go on over and check them out. Also, please remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and I would be forever grateful if you would go on over and leave us a review on iTunes as well. That's going to help this message reach more women. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Here is to you loving yourself.